Well, we're here to talk about gun violence today, and want to introduce my partner, Todd Michaels, who's probably handled as many gun violence cases as anybody in the country. Todd, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here with you, and happy.
And happy Perry, happy the mother of Deshaun. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And
I like the viewers to get the opportunity to know Deshaun. Can you talk a little bit about Deshaun, if you can, for us, and introduce him to the folks watching this?
So my Deshaun was like the life of the party. Always wanted to have fun, always look for the positive in everything. Always made standards for himself, set the standards above and beyond expectation. And he was just a very proud, loving family guy. We miss him.
You know, for the viewers who may not know, Deshaun was killed in the terrible mass shooting at the University of Virginia, where he played football along with two other players, and we represented you in that. And as you and I have often talked, and Todd and I have talked over the years, I would always say in cases, wow, I wish I could have met this individual before, because we've had the privilege to represent so many incredible people that have lost their lives to gun violence. And I never knew that statement was totally false. And what I mean by that is it was the hardest case I've ever worked on because I knew Deshaun. And it was so hard for me. And Todd, I want you to kind of talk to the audience about these types of cases and what makes them different when you represent a family who's been a victim of gun violence versus an auto accident or something else. What makes these cases different to you?
Yeah, you know, Mike, I think you always talk about how gun violence is the cancer of our era, meaning it's going to touch every family. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. We've got this huge problem in society, and we refuse to do anything responsible about it. And we have the honor, which is also emotionally heavy, of representing families who have lost a loved one in a way that is violent, that is unnecessary, that is instant, where there's no opportunity to say goodbye. And so often those families become part of our families, because to tell their story, you've got to get to know them. You have to get to know the person who was lost. You have to get to know how they've been impacted by that loss. Then you've got someone like Deshaun, who is different, because not only was he such a superstar of a kid, his football playing, his artistic abilities, he was going to the University of Virginia. I mean, to me, the thing that typifies who Deshaun was the fact that at the time he died, he was going to get extra credit to watch a play about Emmett Till. You couldn't have had someone who was doing something not only more innocent, but more responsible. That's not how most college kids are spending their morning. But we're meeting the person who lost their life through their family after the fact. I can picture Deshaun as a kid at your house, obviously a good friend of your son, someone who played with your son. And it is a reminder. I don't want to say it showed me, because I think we always know with every one of our clients the enormity and the gravity of the loss they're going through. But the way you kind of get smacked in the face by reality when it's a kid who was there in our lives 1 second and then was gone, just sort of added to the weight of a situation that already is way too heavy.
Well, I often say that, you know, Manny Oliver, who lost his son Joaquin in the Parkland shooting, who Todd and I represented and still represent, and always told me that, you know, it is the epidemic of our time, and it's going to come to you. And, you know, when you think that, you're like, everybody thinks it won't come to them. And then when I got that call that morning from Coach Sims and Happy, it had come to my doorstep. And Happy, you know, we've talked about one of the reasons you brought that case was not just to educate the University of Virginia of what they did wrong when they had a student on campus who had a gun and had problems, but you wanted that to go to every campus in America. You know, talk about that a little bit, about how the what you want to see college campuses do, that they could learn from this terrible incident so that this doesn't happen to a kid in California or Ohio that's on a campus.
So a part of my fight is definitely to bring awareness. And we did send reforms over to University of Virginia, and in those reforms, we were requesting a protocol be made, and that University of Virginia set the standard for what should be done for all college campuses in case of an emergency or, a active shooter on campus. Initially, I felt like my voice was not being heard, so I kept fighting. I kept calling. I kept showing up, like I'm not going away, like something has to be done. This happens every day. And I do believe that I was able to be so boisterous because I was in my denial part of my grief. Right now, I am, this is the third year, and I am now grieving. And I do see some of our fruit being set into action. Yeah. I do see, I do get the calls. I do go out and advocate for whomever, wherever I show up, and that I believe that's part of my healing. But thank you for introducing me to NCVC. I went to Children's Bereavement Center just the other week, and it's amazing just the course of action being taken and the people that I meet and the experiences of others that I learn from and wanting to help everybody with. There is a group of people out there that actually want to help, and I'm thankful that I'm part to be one of those.
Well, you're tremendously courageous and brave to be able to do it. I've always marveled, as has Todd, at our clients' courageousness after going through the ultimate tragedy. And Todd, you mentioned, our government refuses to do anything. We have not passed really any meaningful gun legislation. I mean, I guess under the Biden administration, there were some things that were done. But knowing that, what about your negligent security cases that you feel can make a difference to keep families safer throughout society, and why you bring them and what you hope industry learns from these cases?
Well, sure. So the irony of our state government is the one positive thing they did was after Parkland, they passed a bill, which now they've spent the last few years rolling back. And what we know is with our political wins, we're not going to get any change at the political level. The problem with the civil justice system is that it's imperfect, and that if it was perfect, what it would do is give someone a time machine so they could go back and undo what was done. And so many of our clients truly amaze me because they know that they can't get back what they've lost, and it becomes their life mission, like Happy, to try to prevent the next family from going through it. And they start foundations to deal with these issues, and they band together, and they go to comfort families who are going through this. Through our cases, what the hope is you can't get the government to act, but if you can start making it very clear to business owners, to property owners, that if they don't start taking their risks seriously, if they don't look at the criminal risks on their property, whether they've had a slew of crime or whether it's just because the nature of the business they are or the area they're in, they have a responsibility to the people that they're making money off to secure that place, to make sure that their customers, that their guests, that their residents are going to be safe. And all too often, security is the first thing that they cut because they don't turn a profit off of it. By holding them responsible, by making them answer for their failures, by being able to recover a judgment against them, whether that's a verdict or a settlement, the message starts to become clear that if they don't start taking security seriously, it's going to hit them in the one thing that matters to them, which is their profits. And I always think back on a call you and I got years ago from a guy that owned an affordable housing company that we had sued numerous times. And we got a call from somebody saying they have a relationship with them. And I think his question was, what do I have to do to stop getting sued by you guys? Yeah. And it gave us the chance to have a conversation with him to say, well, what you have to do is stop worrying about the lawsuit and start worrying about the safety on your property. And slowly over time, we started seeing them hire security guards, erect guards and gates, and do the things to keep people safe.
Yeah, I think, it's obviously our goal is to represent every client and get them justice in that individual case. But when you see those actions being taken by the defendants that you have brought a case against, you know you're really affecting change. I always think back to, we had a case where a man was killed at Merrick Park on the mall, and the mall was just built at the time, and they used to have Coral Gables police there on off duty, and they cut it back to save money. Whenever I go to Merritt Park, I go to the place where the police car is supposed to be, and every time I've been there since that incident, that police car is there. And so I think that's a change that these cases can make, and happy what you've done with what the University of Virginia's report has done. And it may not be perfect, but it is talking about, what they need to do with red flags with students on campus that have guns. And as Todd and I do, we always talk about our cases, talk about with anybody we can. Any school administrator I talk to, I'm like, what's your plan? What do you have? You should see this report. You mentioned NCVC. You went to the initial Advocates Academy. What is that like, where you, the Olivers, others who have had the ultimate tragedy get together and talk about what we can do? I almost feel like all of you have these superpowers because you are so brave, you're so courageous. How is that for your journey? And what do you think it's like for maybe us getting more change, having those families united?
For me, it gives me hope. It gives me hope knowing that there are people out there that really care. In those vulnerable times, you get all these phone calls from all these different people, and then you have to find a strategy and figure out, who they really are. But at NCVC, I knew that I was with people that wanted to change and they want to help.
One thing is just spreading awareness. I think, everybody knows, you see it on TV, but I think if people had the angle that we have, which is getting calls every day from people whose loved ones get shot, getting gas, going to school, whether it's college, whether it's high school, walking out of their apartment complex, going to the mall in a robbery, and you start to realize how little control we have and how at risk we are at all times. And it is absolutely incumbent on us, because as a society, we don't take our issues seriously, right? Everyone's always looking at whatever the partisan issue of the day is, but no one ever says, what's the balance between gun rights and gun safety? What role is mental health having in it? It's always an either or. Everyone has their position, and the problem is everything else. Well, the problem is everything. Obviously, something's gone wrong in our society where we have kids walking around who are willing to pick up a gun and shoot someone else's child without thinking of what the consequence is. But what we know is that that's going to happen. So simply saying there's nothing we can do about it isn't acceptable. When you know something's going to happen, that's when you have the responsibility to take action. And so to the extent that you can bring these lawsuits, you can make sure these issues are in the media, you can show the way that the property owner, who has an absolute duty to provide reasonable security on their property, has failed in that duty, and how that allowed this crime to happen. The hope is that at that most micro level, each individual property owner starts to take security seriously, and we start to see less and less of the chaos, of the random shootings, of people being shot in places where they should be safe. And where, frankly, 40 years ago, when we had a more functional society, they were safe.
Well, what's always amazing to me is that this is a uniquely American problem.
Yeah.
96% of the gun violence in the world happens here, and we have 5% of the world's population. I mean, I don't know how you get around those numbers and everything like that, but yet the coalition to get sensible gun laws, to me, should be Walmart, where more mass shootings and shootings happen than any other business in the country. Now, that may be because Walmart's the biggest business, but they have problems with that. The insurance industry, who's paying all these judgments. The United States government, through Medicaid and Medicare, who are paying all the medical bills. It doesn't make sense to me that there's never been this coalition. What are we doing? Todd, I want you to talk a little bit about not really maybe the difference, the unique circumstances, as our firm has handled probably more mass shooting cases than any other. What's different about these mass shootings that you and our firm have handled than other cases?
Well, the answer is a simple word that we use all the time, and that's foreseeability. The whole question, the whole linchpin of responsibility is foreseeable. Our problem's foreseeable. So in 1982 in Yorba Linda, a mass shooting wasn't foreseeable. on April 19th, I forget exactly what year, it was 1997, the day before Columbine happened, it might have been 98, a kid being shot in a school was unthinkable. And now a kid being shot in a school is something you hear about every couple of weeks. So the issue is foreseeability. And what's happened is the people who should be providing security haven't adapted to that. And they just keep relying on the same thing. Well, it was a mass shooting. What could we do? Well, the shooter had mental illness. What can we do? What you can do, what you need to do is look at your problems. The only difference between a mass shooting and an individual shooting is the number of families that are absolutely devastated by it. But in terms of the responsibility, the impact of security, there is no difference. So you talk about this coalition, and what's sad and sinister, but really is a big picture of where we are, is there is a coalition of Walmart and the insurance industry and all these other people. But the coalition is not to do good. What the coalition is to do is to go lobby their legislature and give huge amounts of money to the legislature to try to make sure, not that they make the world safer, but that they're given protection so that when they fail and people die, they can't be held responsible.
Yeah, and talking about, to me, they fight for tort reform, and what you could do is go against a relatively small industry, which is the gun industry, restrict them, and then you would save money. You would save incredible amounts of money, thinking of all these excess carriers we deal with all the time. So I want to turn to you, Happy. One of the most indelible images that is always in my head was when you met Gabby Giffords. Yes. And your guys' hug. I mean, when I think about that hug, it really warms my heart, because it shows me, like Todd said, we might have this group on the other side, but we've got special people. And you are doing special things in Deshaun's honor in our great community here. And I'd love to tell you, if you could tell the viewers about the different things you're doing and when you do them throughout the year, because we want to keep growing them to prevent gun violence in our community. So if you can tell us about some of those things.
So the Deshaun Perry Foundation, I go out with my family. On any given day, we're under the bridge giving out food to the homeless. Some of our bigger events are football camps. We did have a peace march in his honor, which is around September, which is his birthday, September 20th. We do a bike drive. Now, the bike drive was initiated by Deshaun. That was something that him and his friends would always do when he came home from school. Although they didn't have much money, they would go buy toys, go buy bikes, skateboards, anything outside, because Deshaun loved to be outside. He loved playing outside, riding his bike, skating. You could find him just out in the backyard, just throwing the football. He liked to be outside. So he would always wake up on Christmas morning, and sometimes you won't see, like now, you don't see the kids outside because they're inside playing the games. So he would always go knock on the neighbors' doors, and they would all go play basketball down the street. But that was just something that he would do. And I definitely had to keep it going, right? And it's gotten bigger and bigger every year. It started out, of course, his passing was in November, so it was a quick turnaround, but we did it. We did it, and it's been 200, 250, 300, 350 bikes every year since then, and it's just an amazing experience. All of his Gulliver friends comes. It's just heartwarming.
It is.
Yeah, and I try to make sure that I do it around Christmas to not only keep me going and stay out of that grief part, and to keep our family together, doing something positive.
Well, I think, and you know this, you're doing a lot more than that. I mean, I've been to every bike drive, and to see those kids ride off on the bikes in Richmond Heights and just the smiles on their faces. And then the message at the football camp, on Sean Taylor Field, yes, who also lost his life to gun violence, to talk to those young kids about you could be a victim, but you could also be the offender, and you need to keep your life straight. And that's a great message. And Todd, I kind of want to talk about a case that we've hinted at but not talked about. Our firm has handled gun violence cases in probably 25 different states across the country. But one of the more monumental ones that's still ongoing, obviously, was the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas case, which already for the victims is settled for around $150 million, but there's still a defendant out there. You've been lead counsel in that case with a couple other lawyers, and it's, it's one that I think affected our community on a mass scale almost more than any other. Like a Columbine, when you talk about, Colorado and Sandy Hook, and I can rattle off all these darn names because we haven't stopped this. But tell us about the case, who the defendants were, and what is still ongoing for those 34 different victims.
Sure. So I think everybody knows kind of in broad strokes what happened. But obviously, I handled these cases before I had little kids. I think you did too. And then, for me, when my older son was born, one of the first thoughts were, you realize how much you love him, and then you realize how much, when you can't even understand what it's like to love a kid, you can't understand what it would be like to lose a child. Parkland obviously was one of the biggest tragedies for children that our country has ever experienced, single event. You had 17 families who sent their kids to school that day in a safe community who got a panicked call, generally from their kids, saying there's someone in the school shooting. And I'm going to get emotional talking about this. And then the next call they got was calling their child and having nobody answer. And then being called down to the school and having to wait out there in the tent to learn that their children was one of the people who died for going to school. You had 7, and of those 17, 14 were students, and 3 of them were really heroic teachers and administrators. Scott Beagle, who we represented his family, a geography teacher who was holding the door open as the killer was coming down the hallway to make sure kids could get into his room, who got killed. Chris Hickson and Aaron Feiss, who were 2 coaches and administrators who, as opposed to the police officer who was there and armed, who ran away, ran towards the gunfire and gave their own lives to make sure that kids could live. There were 17 other people who were shot and injured. There were obviously a ton of kids who left with stress. And what we learned from that case was how many direct tips the FBI had gotten about this one particular deranged person that the administrators of the school had previously joked, if anyone's going to be a school shooter, it's going to be him. And he had been kicked off campus, and yet that day they allowed him to walk on campus holding a rifle bag, saw him walk on campus, let him walk into a building, and didn't react until gunshots started to be heard. So our 3 main defendants were the FBI, the school board, and obviously Broward Sheriff's Office. And the case settled with the FBI, and it settled with the school board. And I will give the school board credit because they have all kinds of protections in Florida because they're a sovereign entity, and they really stepped up in the aftermath, recognized their mistakes, and did the right thing and helped us find creative ways to get the case resolved without having to go through a long legislative process. The police department, who had a school resource officer assigned whose only job after Columbine was, when you hear gunfire, you are the only armed person on campus, you go to it. And that officer went to the door, to the glass door where the gunshots were coming out of, and ran away and went and hid by a tree and said afterward, I didn't know where the shots were coming from. They're the one defendant who hasn't accepted responsibility yet. And, part of what's so baffling just on a human level was this officer got arrested for his cowardice, and he was acquitted in that case. And obviously that's a criminal case. Parents like Happy, like so many of the Parkland families, the Olivers, the Beagles, have somehow managed, they've been through the worst thing. They've been through the thing we all fear. And there's a lot of ways that you could go. You could lose all your faith in humanity and in the world. You could lose all your purpose. What's been so amazing is watching how many of these families have filtered all that grief into good, whether it's meeting with other families going through this and letting them know there will be a tomorrow, whether it's trying to prevent the next gun tragedy, whether it's just trying to prevent other kids from going down those roads or making sure that they have things that they otherwise wouldn't have. And I mean, what a testament to humanity to see people who have every reason in the world to give up, who instead say, I need to use this to make the world a better place, and that's how I can best honor my child.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. And as we wrap up, Happy, I would ask, I always say to people, it's the toughest thing for humans to do is think this could happen to them. They just can't put themselves in that painful place because they don't have to. Mm-hmm. If you had elected officials in front of you right now, the people who had the power to enact sensible gun control like every other country in the world has, except for the United States of America, what would you tell them from you and really from Deshaun and thinking about future children?
The time is now. We have to act now. We have to save our children. These children, it's every day that you see on the news. And the statement is to come forward and use your platform to do something and be a part of the good outside of, what could happen or the negative. Be that person, be that strength in somebody's family to save a life, because anybody can get their hands on a gun right now. We see that now. It's evident. This is factual evidence that it's happening. Kids are dying. Our futures is diminishing, and we need action now.
Well, I can't thank both of y'all enough for being here. It's an incredibly tough topic, but the fact is it's a real topic, and people need to address it. And I thank you so much for being here and for what both of y'all are doing for all our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike.
A Brand Story Communications podcast production.